Jerry Inspired, we have a very special guest. This is Divya. So, Divya, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Jerry, for having me.
Absolutely. And Divya, not only is she a writer, but she also works in tech. So, she's going to have a really good story for us, and we're definitely going to get inspired by her. So, Divya, without further ado, let's talk about what you wanted to do when you went to high school and college and all that.
That's a great question. I've had a pretty roundabout journey. So, when I entered college, I really thought I wanted to do journalism. I had been on the newspaper staff of my middle school, my high school, and I really enjoyed telling stories, finding stories. And when I got to college, I chose the major of biomedical engineering, which, as a maybe good traditional Indian girl, felt like the right path for me to have a stable career and something that was in science and something that I could, hopefully that skill set would serve me in the future. But I wanted to do journalism on the side. And I think as I learned more about the career, I realized that it requires a lot of hustle to get sources, and I felt like that wasn't necessarily my personality. So what I did instead was I actually was an editor of our engineering magazine. We had an engineering magazine called Illumine, which is dealing with engineering in everyday life. So we would talk about the little engineering miracles that we encounter every day that we think about as normal now. And every article had to do with one of these types of engineering. And so I really enjoyed that merger of tech as well as writing and science. And so I think that was where I was able to play that out. But it always was kind of in the back of my mind that I wanted to do writing one day. And so I left college and I worked at a small company designing prosthetics.
Wow.
It was a startup in San Francisco. I really enjoyed it. But then I realized that my personality is one where I like to draw from a lot of different inspirations. I like to be able to work on many different types of questions and problems. And I think I really admire everybody that goes into healthcare, but I find that with healthcare, you really have to have a single-minded purpose and you really have to be willing to work on one thing dedicated for a really long period of time. And so what I wanted for my career didn't really match. And this is at this point over 10 years ago. And so the field of data science and data analytics was slowly emerging at that time. It was kind of on the early onset. And I heard about it and I ended up asking around, getting a connection to a startup where I worked in analytics, analyzing data from social media to understand trends in social media around big consumer brands. We were doing a lot of natural language processing, and I realized I really liked analytics because it can be applied in pretty much any field. And so from there, I moved into consulting. I was doing data and analytics consulting. I wanted to learn a little bit more about the business side of things. And then I spent 2 years in consulting. I had actually really wanted to travel. That's the other reason why I entered consulting in the first place. But my start date was March 2020. So you can imagine that there was very little travel that happened as a part of that job. And so I felt like I hit a ceiling pretty fast without that travel component. And so then I was looking for my next opportunity and I realized I really like books. I really like writing and reading. I also work in tech and I have this analytics background. And so I ended up at this opportunity at Audible where I work now, which is Amazon's audiobook company. And so I've been able to really merge my interests again, kind of going all full circle all the way back to when I was doing tech and editing and engineering magazine back in college. So it's really nice to be in that space again. And I think that's given me a lot of room and inspiration to even work on my own writing and publish a short story. So that was a long-winded explanation of my background, but you can see I've taken a bit of a meandering route.
That was an awesome journey. I mean, you're the perfect type of person I would love to interview because one of the things that just hearing briefly your journey is you were able to jump on certain trends, right? And especially that data science trend you jumped on was awesome. How did you feel like, okay, this is the way to go? And then how did you then decide, okay, not only am I going to do this, but like I'm actually going to do it? It's one thing to be like, I can do this, but it's like, okay, like what do I study? So like, tell me more about that journey.
Yeah, definitely. So the startup that I worked at, as I mentioned, we were analyzing social media data to understand trends to be able to advise Fortune 500 companies on their business. So that could be anywhere from big automotive companies on when they're launching a new SUV, what kind of features are most interesting to customers. And one of the things that we found in looking at social media data, people talking on Twitter and on Facebook about their preferences, it's like captain seats are really important, like 2 separate seats so that if you have a big family, a bunch of kids, they can rush through the middle into the back. You don't have to like pull the seat down every time. And it's really interesting that these are things that you know intuitively, but when you actually look through data en masse about what people in the real world are saying, you end up pulling out these patterns. And I think it's really cool psychological exercise to be able to come up with a hypothesis on what you think the data might say, dig into the data, see if it proves or disproves that hypothesis. It's really like an investigative journey, which is really fascinating. And so I think when I realized that that same investigative principle could be applied in so many different fields, I was hooked, because it's like you're solving a mystery every single day. And it obviously gives you a lot of inspiration and fodder for your own personal life of how you might think about different problems as well. So I think that was one of the reasons why I think I wanted to stick with analytics in the long term. It was a joy to work on those problems.
It's an interesting kind of mentality that you're highlighting. I'm applying to grad school right now, and part of it is also I have to unlock those feelings for whatever program I'm applying to, right? You have to find, okay, like what are the commonalities between something that attracted me here in the past versus now, and like you're able to find and unlock those feelings and apply it to whatever new role. So that's an excellent thing that you were able to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was great that the role ended up being such a good fit for me. And I think the other aspect of it is I had mentors who encouraged me to think of it that way, and who were always coming up with new and interesting hypotheses. And so I would say, I can't necessarily credit myself for all of that growth. I had a lot of really great people who encouraged me and supported me along the way as well, and taught me.
And how did you find those mentors?
I think naturally in the course of work, you have maybe two kinds of mentors: the ones that you seek out and the ones who naturally assume that role. I think there's one person in particular that I'm thinking of that taught me a lot of little details very on in my professional career that I honestly would never have thought of if it wasn't for him. So as an example, when you're presenting in a business context or professional setting, you're making slides in a PowerPoint presentation, and I'll never forget to this day, one of the things he told me was, we have the date in the corner. And sometimes, when you're making slides, you kind of drag stuff around, and that date ends up moving around a little bit, so that when you go from slide to slide, there's like a slight twitch in the corner of, like a certain component that's supposed to stay constant every slide. And he was like, this whole thing is a presentation to be able to capture an audience's attention, and you don't want a single thing to distract that audience from the message that you're trying to communicate. And even that tiny motion is something that can pull the audience's attention away. And I feel like those little details that were taught to me, I will never forget it. I was told that maybe 9-10 years ago, and that's something that has stayed with me mentality wise and has kind of infused the way that I go about my work in general. And so when you hear those types of tips, then kind of following up with those people, seeking out more feedback, and treating feedback as a gift, I feel like is one way, I think, to find the right mentors. And then in addition to that, seeking people outside of your field as well. In writing, for example, I didn't really have the capacity to do it while I was working, so I would take a lot of writing classes outside of work, and I found writing mentors that way, and I actively pursued settings where I could learn something new and then take those learnings and maybe share something with that mentor back and get feedback. And so it's really about seeking out the spaces you're interested in, but then also seeing where you're naturally getting feedback that serves you and maybe pursuing that more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So right now you're at Audible, and what is the day to day like? Is it every day's different? Is it every day's the same?
From the outside looking in, every day might look the same. I get up and I sit at my laptop every day. But the questions that we answer might be different. One day we might launch a big global marketing campaign. And so you're thinking about, if I put a billboard in London and I do a subway takeover in New York and I do a pop-up coffee activation in Japan, and all of these three things are working in concert to let customers know about Audible, what is that actually doing for my business? What is the incremental value I'm generating for my business? That's one kind of question you might answer. Another question is, I'm choosing between a title on pop music and a title on sports and a title on this really famous director that's recently passed away or something like that. And I only have a limited budget to produce new titles. Which one should I invest in, both to delight my customers, but also, of course, it is Amazon, and we are thinking about, what will serve our business as well. And so what makes sense from a business perspective to add to our portfolio. And so every day you get a new question like this, and you have to use the same data to come up with insights and hypotheses, and go through that same investigative process I described for you earlier that I honed maybe a little bit at that startup. But like I said, from the outside looking in, it might just look like I'm at my computer every day, but every day is a new question.
Wow. What's a recent project you guys launched?
So this is very exciting. We just launched a full cast edition of Harry Potter. It's a really special project for Audible because obviously these are beloved titles. Harry Potter has been around for many, many years now, and it's amassed such a huge fan base such that we're able to create movies, and now there's a new TV show coming out. And so it's a really special, unique group of customers that are voracious readers. They love the title and they have a sentimental attachment to it. So how do you create something that really pulls this group of people back and delights them in the same way? And so what this new series does is, instead of having a single narrator, we are casting individual actors for every single character. So there's hundreds of voice actors involved. There's sound production, Dolby Atmos, so it'll sound like sounds are coming in different sides of your headphones. And so it's a really immersive experience that's really meant to feel like an audio play or an audio movie of sorts. That's been a really fun project for me because I think one of the things we want to know is, we set out to capture this audience of Harry Potter lovers, and we already have a lot of them who love the traditional recordings, but were we able to bring new people into the fold? Are they liking it? What could we be doing better? So these are the kinds of questions that I'm working on answering.
My friend was over for Martin Luther King, the holiday, and he mentioned Harry Potter too. So it's like, I was like, someone just mentioned Harry Potter to me. So it's still in everyone's mind. And of course, we know there's going to be a TV show of it too, right? So yeah, everything seems to be the right timing. People are wondering, okay, how's the TV show going to turn out? And then I'm a Potter fan, of course. I'm a Harry Potter fan. We also know that the movie skipped over a lot of stuff, especially fourth book, man. Fourth movie. You guys did do a good job. Fourth book. So like we all kind of want to go back to the old stuff and like get the full details, get everything. So yeah, it's a great project.
Thank you. I mean, I can't take full credit, obviously. There's a lot of people at Audible who worked really hard to make this thing come to life, but I get to play a small part in figuring out if it did what we wanted it to or not.
Mm-hmm. And how many offices does Audible have? Is Audible like all around the world, or is it like mostly centered around New York and LA and stuff like that?
So our main global offices right now or at least in the US, would be in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Newark, New Jersey, and then Culver City, Los Angeles. But we also have big major hubs in London, in Berlin, in Singapore. So we do have global offices as well that all coordinate, but I would say the majority of folks sit here in the United States. And furthermore, the majority of folks actually sit in Newark, New Jersey, which is where our headquarters is. Our founder, Don Katz, is a native New Jerseyan, I suppose. And so he is very passionate about giving back to the community in New Jersey and keeping the Audible culture and headquarters in New Jersey. So at least that's where the majority of folks sit.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Wow. So you also recently published your first short story. Was it a short story or a book, or tell me more about it?
Yeah, so it was a short story, actually. I recently moved from New York to Los Angeles, and I had written a short story a couple of years ago, at this point, maybe 2 years ago, about my experiences in New York, kind of encapsulating everything that I had learned. And I was lucky enough to get it published in a small literary journal that I really admire, with an editor that I really admire. Her name is Laura Pegram. And it was really cool working with an editor because, I'm on the technical side of things at my job. I get to see on the other end, after a title is produced, how do people receive it? What do they like about it? What do they not like about it? Are people listening to it? But I think there's so much involved in the process of creating the story from end to end. Like I said, it was a maybe 3-year process overall. It's only a 10-page story, but it was a 3-year process overall to write the story, find the right home for it, work with an editor, and then ultimately see it to publication. And so it was really fun for me now working in the publishing and entertainment and book industry to see on the other side, how do writers actually go through that process. So it was really amazing, and it was kind of a really poetic moment that the story that I had written that captured a lot of my feelings about New York was published as I was basically leaving New York to come to Los Angeles.
Wow. So you started writing the story when you were in New York, basically.
Yes, yes. And it got published after I moved here. So it's actually also interesting to read something like that, because, you know, you're, as everyone is throughout their career, you know, you become different people as you move through different facets of your career. So reading it back is almost like reading the story of a different person. But it's really cool to see that snapshot in time.
So when I graduated college, I wrote a little memoir because I spent 2 years going to public school in China, and
Wow.
it's still in my Google Drive. And I recently, when I was applying to grad school, I was reading that memoir, and I was like, wow, I was a really good writer back then. Not to say I'm not a good writer anymore, but like, I was like, that snapshot, that time when you just graduated college, you're probably at the best of your writing abilities. I was like, wow, I was a good writer by the end of college. So I'm
Oh
like,
my
I
gosh.
need to capture that somehow, I guess.
I'm sure your readers, I mean, your viewers would love to read your work. So I would definitely encourage you to publish it somewhere where we can all enjoy it.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you went about and found this editor to work with, how you found this literary magazine. Like let's go more into this. This is such a fascinating journey. So yeah, let's talk about how did you read this magazine beforehand? Is that kind of how you wanted to get published in it?
Yeah, actually. So I'm nowhere near finishing a novel. I would love to finish a novel. But one of the pieces of advice that's frequently given to early writers earlier in their career is to look at the publishers that your favorite authors have been published in earlier on in their career. And I took this really amazing writing class with a woman named Kali Fajardo-Anstein. She is based in the Pacific Southwest, and she writes these amazing stories about Indigenous folks there and the community. And I really appreciate her writing. And I was able to take a writing class with her, and she mentioned this journal. And so at that time, this is at this point, I want to say 6 years ago, I looked into the journal a lot more. I started to read their work, and I really identified with it. And then there was an opportunity to take a master class with the editor. And so I signed up for that. And at the end of that class, the editor reached out to me. During the course of the class, I had actually workshopped this story. And so I gotten feedback from my peers and from the teacher of the class. And she reached out to me and said, would you be interested in publishing the story in our journal? And I honestly didn't expect it at all. I've never published before, and I was really taking it as a learning opportunity. But it was this moment where I had taken a class, I had kind of imbibed what the teacher had said. I had thought, okay, let me pursue and look into what that writer, where that writer found success, and then I kind of followed their journey. So it was a long time coming, but it was a pretty sequential series of events, I would say.
I see. And how many times did you guys workshop the story in the class?
In the class, just once, but every class we would go through different techniques, and then we would each on our own go through our story and see where we could apply those techniques. So every class there was a new idea or device that was presented to us that we could take or leave as it served our story. And then we get one chance to then present our story to the whole class. It is a really big time commitment to read and to provide feedback on someone's story. So it's not often that you get to kind of give multiple times. But then after the class, I was able to go back and forth with the editor maybe twice on different versions. And so she gave me a lot of really incredible feedback. And I think what was really incredible about it was the story actually changed a lot in the course of working with the editor. You know, characters were moved, new characters were created. Some scenes that I was really attached to were entirely deleted. And so that's another part that I think was really illuminating for me about the editing process is when you see a final book or story, there's actually so many people that went into crafting the story, not just the author of it. And I thought that was really interesting too. The story might actually kind of evolve and move away from the author and their original intention with it.
That makes sense, especially as the number of people that help with the story increases.
Exactly.
And it's a good thing, because if you're a person like me who, let's say, is doing everything from the beginning to the end, right? There's times when it's like you just can't let go of something that isn't working. It's just part of it's
Totally.
too much your baby. So that's why it takes a village to do anything really, to do anything that has mass appeal.
Yeah, definitely. There's the phrase which I kind of hate because it's a little morbid, but it's kill your darlings. And I think it's a phrase that's pretty common in writing, is that you can't get too attached to anything because you don't know, you may love it, but everybody who reads it might be like, "Ooh, I don't know if this is really working." And so you can't get too attached or personal with it.
Yeah. So the question now is, what is next in your writing? Do you have a list of things you want to write? Is there one thing you're writing? Tell us more.
That's a great question. I always have a huge backlog of things that I love to write. I'm currently working on a novel that I'm really interested in, about kind of the dichotomy between folks that are single in their 30s and people that have been, maybe married young and are married into their 30s. And
Mhm.
where is that space to find community as a single person in your 30s? It gets a little bit darker than that, but I will say that's the starting premise of where I'm interested in working. But I also am really interested in speculative fiction. Obviously, I work in tech, so I learn a lot about AI and about where technology is going, and I'm super fascinated by those ideas. And so I write a lot about technology as well. Those are ideas that are on the back burner because I've decided I want to focus on my first project and really get it out the door. But I'm hoping maybe to finish that this year. And then also, one of my best friends is an actress. And so I've also been really interested in maybe working on screenplays with her, or maybe like TV pilots. So just a lot in the works. But for now, I want to focus on that novel.
Yeah, especially if you're in the LA area, right? Yeah, might as well dive into
Definitely.
some of that and potentially even, I know you're busy, but if you take an acting class, that might help the writing process too, because it's like, oh, how do I write dialogue?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'll say that, obviously everybody has their own insecurities and things they're working on. And I think um, an acting class is maybe putting yourself out there to be the center of attention, or presenting yourself as an individual as the artwork for judgment. And I think that can be really scary. I really admire people that do that kind of work. So I think you're right that maybe that's the next kind of push I need. I think as a writer, you can kind of hide behind the scenes and say, those are the characters, or that's the actor that's acting it. I'm not, it's now removed from me. But when you are the person creating the art, it's a little scary in a good way.
How do you balance your work, your life, etc.? Or are you pretty just naturally good at that?
I'm not good at that.
Oh,
I'll tell
okay.
you, I worked on a different novel for like 5 to 10 years. I fully scrapped it because I had been working on it for so long that I got sick of it. And now the one I'm working on now is a much newer concept. And I think one of the reasons that I actually moved was to take a step back from maybe a busier life and find some routine, maybe take a little bit of a reset so that I can balance my day job and this dream of finishing a novel. But it is really hard because, you want to treat your novel as a second full-time job. But when you add 8 plus 8, that's 16 hours. You just have 8 hours left to sleep, but you also want to have a life, and you also want to eat well, and you also want to exercise. So I wouldn't say I'm acing it, but I'm trying my best to find pockets of time where I can and create more routine around writing and reading and getting inspired.
2016 to around like 2018, or maybe 2016, 2019. Those were the years where I was like, work full-time job and then work 8 hours afterwards, right? So when I hear the 8-8, I'm like, oh, Divya understands the 8-8. So she's done the 8-8 before.
It's hard. It's really hard, especially when you want to be a human being who has community and takes care of themselves. It's hard to make all of that happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you talk about community, because part of why I was able to do that for a few years was because I worked in a WeWork. So naturally, you had
Mm,
community. And I don't think the whole WeWork thing's really the same anymore. A lot of things
yeah,
happened with the company, with the 2020, et cetera. And so, but I
completely.
think there was a sweet spot where you could sort of do the 8-8 and have community, because there were a lot of other people doing it at the same time.
Definitely. I do think that the nature of community has changed a lot, where maybe people were craving it a lot during the pandemic, and then now people have been inundated and are maybe craving kind of taking a step back and focusing on themselves. And so I think community is cyclical and depending on the stage and season of life that you're in. But I think right now, I'm almost taking a little bit of a step back. I moved away from a lot of my community in New York, and maybe trying to channel some of that community energy into my solo projects for a little while, but hopefully my season of community will come back soon.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing I always tell people about LA is you actually surprisingly it's not too hard to find community because everyone knows LA is so sprawled out and so weird. It's like people actually will want to like you host an event or something, people will want to come. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I think I'm already sensing that there are a lot of artists here really putting their work out there. And I think that creates a safer space. Maybe yes and no. And that's like a safer space that there's a lot of other folks putting their work out there. So you might gain a little bit more confidence. But at the same time, that of course means more competition because there are so many more people. And so maybe people are more critical. I don't know. I'm looking forward to exploring what the culture is like around that. But I am really inspired by seeing how many people here are artists who are putting their work out there.
If you had to give yourself advice, let's say now talking to high school Divya, what would you say?
Mm. I would say a couple things. I would say probably take a little bit of time between high school and college. Don't jump right into college. I think back to 18-year-old naive me who signed up to be a biomedical engineer, having one little idea what that was, just heard engineering in the name and it was medical. So it sounded like check in terms of the right job. But really taking time to explore what else is out there. Like there are so many amazing opportunities if you're willing to maybe rough it, like work side hustles as a barista to make some money, but then travel the world cheaply and see what else is really out there. I think I would have really benefited from that. And I might have chosen a completely different career path. I also kind of wish I hadn't been scared to do journalism. Now looking at it, that's a career I would have also equally loved, but I shied away from it because I didn't think I had the hustle at the time. But maybe if I had been able to explore the world more and see what that looked like, or maybe take an internship or a gap year of some kind where I got to work on that and see what it was like in practice, things would be a little bit different. So I think just take the time to explore interests more before jumping into a career. Obviously, I made my way to somewhere that I'm happy, but I think I could have taken so much more advantage of the resources that I had available to me in college if I had a little bit more idea of what I actually wanted to do.
Yeah, I think what you said is music to my ears. I go to the library a lot to study, and there's a lot of high schoolers because my library is very close to the high school I went to. And
Mm.
high schoolers, a lot of them, that's the thing they always hear from me. I'm like, yeah, you can take a gap year. I keep saying that. I'm sure their parents are really mad that I say that, but I echo exactly what Divya said. Like, take some time. You could, especially when you're just out of high school, like people will are okay paying you like not too much, but you can learn on the job, right? There's a lot of side hustles like Divya said you could do, work as a
Yeah.
barista, work at a clothing store, do something, and then you can like make some money, take that money and invest it in exploring. You don't have to spend the money on a lot of debt or whatever going to college immediately. So I think like that's advice I would also give like high schoolers nowadays. And yeah, so I love what you said. And then the thing about journalism too, because I explored journalism after college, right? And what I will say from my experiences, there's a reason I ended up applying to certain things that I've told you about because what I found out about journalism was that they were having trouble adapting to the digital age. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, now there's some consolidation. You're seeing a lot of these like really great journalists who just like they're not even part of like an organization. They're self-journalists, but they make millions, right? It's
Yeah.
possible. But to get to that point, it was a very, very really tough transition point. And even now, some of my friends who stuck to the journalism journey since high school, they're telling me, oh my God, the like traditional journalism industry just contracting. So
Yeah.
in a way, I think your journey was good because to feel that stress in journalism when the digital media ad spend started becoming more than both movies and TV, like
Wow.
that's what made me decide to move on from journalism officially. So I could tell you
Yeah.
from my inside scoop, I think you did the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the grass is definitely always greener. And I think, to your point, even working at a tech company, we're being squeezed by the advent of technology and there's so much pressure to automate and to cut costs. And I feel like, I can only imagine how much more amplified that is in a field like journalism where you're competing for people's attention against like cute dogs on TikTok at a certain point. And so, it must be a lot of pressure in that industry too. And how do you adapt and grow and change? I'm not sure if I have an answer for that, but I could imagine that it would be really stressful, and maybe I'm romanticizing it a little bit.
What is your sort of stance on using AI to help your writing? Do you use AI to help your writing, or are you purely like, okay, only AI to help my spelling or something? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't use AI for any story or plot because I really think and believe in the power of human creativity. And I think obviously AI is trained on the corpus of knowledge on the internet. And I think a lot of the experiences of people of color and minorities are maybe not represented in that corpus in the same way. And so if we want to tell our stories, it's going to come from our brains because our stories are underrepresented on what exists out there already. On the flip side, there are little things that I will use AI for. Like, I'll tell you, I wrote a chapter the other day where the main character is interacting with Reddit. And honestly, people on Reddit have the craziest screen names. And so I had ChatGPT help me come up with some interesting like usernames on Reddit because I just could not come up with something like mildly interesting toast, which is one of the ones that it came up with, which was very helpful for me.
I think that use of AI is perfect. Like, for example, sometimes when I can't find the right title for a YouTube video I'm making, I'll like ask AI to help, right? Like little micro things like that. But yeah, like big ideas and stuff like that. Like applying to grad school, I didn't have AI write my essays because I knew, like you said, I love what you said about it would give you something generic, but it's not usually representative of what you would write. And kind of an aside, but when YouTube first started, that's why so many Asians found a voice on YouTube. If you remember the YouTube generation 1, generation 2 YouTubers, a lot of them were Asian. It was like
Yeah.
because no other
Mhm.
place gave Asians a voice. So YouTube became the place that gave them a voice. So it's like, okay, now AI, it might give certain people voices or overrepresent certain voices. It's almost more reason, especially if you're a minority, to like stick to your own voice. Like your voice is even more unique now than before.
Absolutely. I love the way you frame that.
Were there any jobs that you didn't like when you like from your past?
Oh yeah. The job that I did not enjoy was I worked at Express for a period of time. And this was at the time when Express was the height of cool. So I thought it was going to be a very cool job.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I realized how thankless some of that work can be. For example, I worked Black Friday, which was nightmarish. This is like in the early 2000s when people still went to malls and Black Friday was crazy. You could spend hours like folding a stack of shirts only to have one person like look you in the eye as they like pull the one from the bottom and the whole thing falls over. I think another instance of a woman approaching me with a coupon that was expired, and I was junior. I was very new to the job. There was nothing I could do to override the system. And she fully berated me in front of the whole store about not being able to use this coupon, even though it was expired. And I didn't know how to handle it because I was really young at the time. And so I very quickly realized how important it is to, one, really thank the people who do those jobs because they're really hard and they're put in terrible situations all day. But then two, I realized, it's really nice to have a job where you feel like you're incrementally improving at something every day or working on a project that you're really passionate about. Because I think in that role, as I mentioned, there are tasks that you just do over and over every day. And once you've mastered them, you don't feel like there's a growth on top of that. And so I think I was looking for a career where I was able to kind of grow consistently. And I've done that with my subsequent jobs since. It's not just a job at Express. Every time I hit a ceiling at a role, that's when I felt like it was time for the next role. And so I think I learned that very on at Express, but that was probably my least favorite job.
I think every person should have an experience in retail. I think
Yeah.
having that experience was just like such a even at that point it was like ugh, right. But you look back on it, you're like, wow, it taught me a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I will never look at Express the same, but also the people who work in those roles, they're truly tested in patience every single day. It's really incredible.
Yeah, it is. So right before I started my first full-time journalism job, I worked at Banana Republic. So I also had a stint in retail. And it was funny because one of my biggest takeaways was also like I became way more thankful for everyone
Mhm.
that works at the mall or at any store
Yeah.
because I've had that experience, 40% of the time you're folding, right? It's like the manager's like, fold. What if you have nothing to do, fold,
Yeah.
fold. All of us still can fold clothes because of it. So that was
Yeah.
one of the skills we have for our entire life now. But like you'd be like, did someone just set off a bomb like 5 minutes after we just made the section good? It literally feels like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, that was crazy. Yeah. Um, that's cool. I didn't think we would talk about that, but the tales from retail. There's a subreddit talking about Reddit, by the way. There's a subreddit
Oh,
called
really?
Tales from Retail.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. I should really check that
Yeah,
out. I don't
actually,
know if
maybe
I want to
even
relive it.
anonymously write about some of it. I did back in the day to get stuff off my chest. I wrote about some of the funniest retail stories.
Oh my God, that's incredible. Yeah, you need that outlet sometimes because people can be intense in those environments.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I guess yeah. Ask questions my way if you want. If you have anything.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so curious about the fact that you were interested or that you were in the journalism industry and then now you're moving away from it. And I'm curious, how did that come to be and how did you make that decision?
It happened early because the year I was in journalism, that year TV ad spend was still more than digital ad spend, if you can imagine that. So the year before that, digital ad spend already beat theatrical ad spend. But TV, that was like the height of like HBO's Game of Thrones stuff. TV was still number one back then. And
Yeah.
then by the time I left journalism, digital ad spend, that was the first year digital ad spend beat TV and movies.
Wow. That's
So I saw
incredible.
the trends. It was too obvious. Now, looking back on it, right? I probably could have done it smarter because I was working in PR. So like I did the smart thing, which was I transitioned from journalism into PR. It's a very natural transition. But maybe
Mm,
I should have like just like kept my head down, saved up more money before I fully embraced the digital route. And so like worked in PR for 2 years. But my frustration with PR was exactly the same frustration with journalism. Like they weren't adapting to the times. Why are you
mm.
pitching a journalist at a TV network if like you can, I don't know, pitch a YouTuber or like the other thing is as a PR agency, why don't you generate your own buzz? Why do you have to borrow the voice of other people, right? But again, that's the PR paradigm. It's the strategic communication paradigm. It's a peripheral persuasion route, I believe you call it in marketing. Like if you hear from a expert or a influencer, some people just put more weight on that, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
matter if something goes viral 5 million hits, but if an influencer says it, so
totally.
yeah. So
That's really interesting.
that's just to answer your question. That's kind of why I decided to leave journalism. Now, obviously, you could argue some of what I do, especially on my martial arts channel, is still journalism. So I still applied it. Like I interview people, I dig up stories, I do a lot of kind of investigative stuff with martial arts. So I managed to kind of build a little journalism career in what I do online. But yeah, and sometimes I do miss that kind of environment because I don't know if have you ever interned at like like for example when you were working on the engineering journal, right? Did you guys have like the 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock thing where like all the reporters, all the editors, the producers sat around pitching stories to each other? Did you guys have that?
We didn't have that at the magazine because we
Mhm.
had sort of an independent process that people submitted pitches to us and then we would go through the pile essentially and pick out what we thought was relevant for the issue at the time. But we did have pitch sessions in high school, which is a long time ago and nothing anywhere close to your professional rooms. But I do remember those pitch sessions and I think they were a really interesting forum for being able to come up with ideas because it sort of happens like on the spot and people kind of building off of each other.
Yeah, exactly. And I do miss those because you get to see what people are thinking, right? And then you get to see certain reporters, okay, because obviously certain news stations have certain bents, but you're like, oh, this reporter pitched a story that's a little bit like on the opposite side of the spectrum. It's like, oh, so like you see a lot of
Yeah.
things like that type of energy in a room is really
Yeah.
it goes back to the community thing you were talking about, Divya. Like I do miss that part about journals. And, a lot of these citizen journalists, a lot of these YouTube channels that report on things, I don't think they have that type of organizational structure that like a traditional TV station or a traditional newspaper would have with, like a 3 o'clock and then like a morning pitch session kind of thing. So
Yeah, definitely. I do think that influencer culture and everyone kind of moving behind a camera in the safety of their own home has really changed the game in so many industries, but most especially those industries that used to be as collaborative as the one you're describing.
yeah.
I am curious also, you had mentioned that there are a lot of obviously really successful self-journalists out there, and it sounds like from moving from journalism to PR to then producing your own content, that must have been a really interesting journey too. So what prompted you to create that space for martial arts journalism?
I worked too hard in high school, worked too hard in college. And so I took a pause in my martial arts journey. So
Mhm.
after I graduated from Penn, I was actually in LA for the summer. And that summer, I was like really lost. Partly it's just because, you just spent so many years on education. Suddenly you're not going to school anymore. Like your
Yeah.
body has like a decompression, for lack of a better word. But I didn't understand that back then. But I was just trying to find myself. And then I was like, whoa, there's a Kempo. Kempo's like a hybrid system, kind of karate-ish. Kempo school literally right next to me. And then I was like, you know what? Let's just walk into it. And then I went in and I was like, oh, this is what I was missing. This was a hobby of mine that I didn't get to do. I put off to the side. So you could say so many of these years in the past, just with building this great channel was making up for all the years that I didn't get to like
Wow.
enjoy a hobby in high school and college. And there is a lot of stuff. Sometimes you can take your frustrations, right? That's another thing. Like I was able to take my frustrations and make a career out of them. So,
Mm,
like, I was frustrated when I was a kid doing martial arts because there was too much dance. I wanted to learn how to fight.
sure.
So like, so much of how I built my channel was investigative journalism. Let's dig up the bad martial arts. Let's report on them. And viewers appreciate it because viewers don't want to spend like 5 years training a bad system. So,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's been really interesting for me too, is seeing how there's a forum for every story. And if you have a story and you feel strongly about something, there's definitely going to be people out there that relate to you and that want to see more of that. That's really cool. I'm definitely really inspired by what you did.
well, thank you. It's very inspiring to hear this. You've been working on stuff. Like you've been working on stuff for so long. And if there's one lesson I learned from you, I will look for potentially some of these authors that I read in like middle school and elementary school, like Asian American authors. I'm gonna look at where they got published. I'm like, hey, this company, if you're still around, do you want to read my my memoir
Yeah,
that I wrote? Like, you really
absolutely.
inspired me.
I can't wait to read your memoir one day. I think it's going to be really cool. And honestly, maybe even you should add to it now that you have so many more life experiences ever since. I'm sure you probably have a lot of advice for that version of yourself as well, now looking back.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but that can at least be like a final chapter. Like, oh, looking back on it now, how would I give this person advice? Ooh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. I'm
You
super
gave me a
interested to
final
read your
bookend chapter because I just couldn't fit that. One of the reasons I never tried to see if I could publish this, I never knew how to end it because I
Mm,
ended it on, there was an incident at I remember years later, there was an incident at the airport the day I landed in China. It was basically some kid I think was getting kidnapped or something. I was like, do I
mm.
want to end it on that dark? Like, so I was like,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So like that's why that was like the secret reason. I'm just telling everyone now public. That's why I never published it. I'm like, I felt like it didn't have the right ending. So maybe this is the ending. Maybe just help me with the ending.
Absolutely. Maybe there's a full story moment there somewhere. I think you already told me the full story moment in some ways, to be honest, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading your work.
Definitely. Definitely. So do you have a working title yet for your next story, or that's in the
Oh, no, I don't. I'm so bad with the titles. Like that's kind of the kind of thing that I would outsource. And it's almost like that's the kind of thing that comes to me at the very end after you seeing the full body of work. I'm still very early on in the drafting process. I think I have maybe 50 pages only. So I actually don't even know how it's going to end yet. And so I feel like once I know how it ends, I'm going to come back and to the beginning and see if I can make sure that I'm sprinkling in all the right foreshadowing details for the reader. And I think that the title will include that.
That's so interesting. If you ever listen to interviews with Mr. Beast talks about how he always has a title and a thumbnail. Like that's the first thing he thinks about,
Oh,
right? It's like you and I also don't work that way. Like I think about my titles almost last too. Even every YouTube video I make, I don't go into it thinking I like
yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting work process. There's no right or wrong answer, right? But like it's like you and I work a certain way, Mr. Beast works another way.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that those types of details reveal themselves to me throughout the creative process, but it's really cool to have just a single concept or a single scene in mind and to build it all around that too. I think that's a very interesting thought process. I'd be curious to maybe shake up my process one day and try it that way, but I'm sticking to what I know for now. We'll see.
Yeah, it's the journey versus the product, right? It's like you got to care about both, but I think both you and I really appreciate just the journey of
Yeah,
creating the product.
exactly. I so agree.
This is Divya. I think it's a very good first interview, and we'll bring her back in the future, maybe when it gets closer to your next story, or if you publish another shorter story or something like that.
Sure, yeah. I'd be happy to share the short story that's already been published with you, and then maybe in the future there'll be another success to talk about and come back. And same likewise, I can't wait to hear about your future successes as well.
Okay. I think that's a deal. I think you've thoroughly inspired me to do a little bit more with that memoir that's been sitting there for 10 years.
I love it.
Awesome. Do you have social media? Do you want to give social media for people if they want to follow you?
Sadly, I don't. I'm like
Mhm.
the max social media I have is a LinkedIn and I'm a TikTok lurker. So I don't really have it. You're welcome to follow me on LinkedIn, I suppose, but I've never really given that out before.
How
Otherwise, I
about
don't,
how can they find your story that you wrote?
maybe I can link it to you. But it's in Quayle Journal, Kweli, Quayle Journal. And so if you look up Quayle Journal and then my name, the name of the short story is Baby Pearl.
Oh.
It should hopefully come up there.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'll find it and then I will put that as a link in the description.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I wish I had a website. Now you're inspiring me. I'm like, oh, I should have had a website ready for something like this, but in the future, maybe.
Yeah, in the future. Awesome. Everyone, this was Divya. And leave your comments and for next time when she's back, we'll answer some of your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry. Thank you, everyone, for listening.